Okay, Steve Mazzone here from Ocean State Running, and we're here to talk about the Arnold's Mills Road Race, a tradition for the last 52 years, a race that draws a considerable amount of high school runners, past and present. And joining me here today are three people very familiar with the race. Jack Thornhill, who's run it 48 straight years, so since 1972, Jack has run this 4-mile race. We have former race director Tom Kenwood, who's been the race director since the early 80s, but don't let that word former fool you, because he still helps us out. I still consider him almost like the race director of this race regardless. And we have Jim Dandino, a two-time winner, winning in 1996 and 1998, also helps out with the race now. So guys, welcome aboard. A great race, a great tradition. But again, I want to welcome you guys here today. This year, the race will be virtual, just like every other race, because of COVID-19. It's kind of forced us to make it virtual, but we still think it can be a success. And that's what we're here today to talk about. The virtual race will take place June 28th to April 4th. And during that time, that's when you would run 4 miles at a course of your choosing, including the Arnold's Mills race, including the Arnold's Mills course. So guys, I do want to talk about this race. And one thing about this race over the years is it traditionally gets 500-600 people each and every year. It's a race that doesn't do a lot of advertising and yet still draws the numbers. Tom, I'm going to begin with you. Talk about this race and the tradition. It seems, again, every year we have 500-600 people, including about 300 or 400 the day of the race. So Tom, talk about your experience with this race.
Well, my experience with the race is just a labor of love, because year after year I see people that I coached over the many years that I was coaching at Cumberland High School come back. A lot of them have brought their children to run the race. So in that regard, it's just a tremendous reunion for me. And that's why I'll continue coming back to it year after year.
And Jack, like I was telling everybody, you've run this 48 straight years, which is an incredible feat. And this year you're going to be back there, right? Except this time you're doing it virtual. And the one thing I just want to add is that you're the Grand Marshal, too, of the parade this year. But Jack, 48 straight years, talk about that. I mean, you want to keep that streak going, but how are you able to keep the streak going like you've done?
It's been tough some of the years. I've had some injuries, and I've just been lucky those injuries didn't happen right before the race. But I've had them within a couple of months before the race, so I kind of guide my training towards that. I want to be able to run 4 miles, and so I don't train for 10 milers or anything like that. And it's just something. It's something we do every July 4th. Me and my family, we're always there, and can't wait for July 4th, and they're cheering me on. It's like it's a tradition, a family tradition.
And Jack, why don't you talk about that first year running back in 1972? What persuaded you to do it that first year?
Okay, could you repeat that again? What was?
I said back in 1972, the first time that you ran this race. What persuaded you to do this race the initial year? Why did you pick this race?
Actually, there was a story behind that. My brother had run it in 1971, and I saw him run that race. It was the first road race I think I ever saw. And then in 1972, he and I went out to run the Rose Arts Festival race in Connecticut, and it was a brutal day. We had multiple times, both of us. And he said, you know, he always heard that if you run a bad race, run another one as soon as possible. So I can't remember the exact days that it was on, but I think July 4th may have been like 3 or 4 days after that Rose Arts Festival race. And so I followed Bill's advice, and we ran on July 4th in Cumberland, and it was great. We really enjoyed it. We enjoyed the way the race was put on. It was, I'd say, like an old-fashioned type race, and a lot of people knew each other. So that was really how I started. And then the second year, I thought, hey, I'm going to run this one again. And it got to the point where after about maybe 15 or 20 years, I thought, you know what, I'm going to run this one every year as long as I can. And hopefully that's a few more years.
And I just want to tell everybody that you've been pretty competitive, especially in those early years, and running sub 19. I guess when it was a 3.8 mile course back in 1979, I believe.
Yeah, it was.
And Jim, I want to talk to you. You've been a past winner, winning in 1996, 1998 as well, but always competitive in those early years. Talk about that, but also talk about the big high school competition we usually get each and every year at this race.
Oh, that's how I started. You hear about this race from your first years at Cumberland High School, and it's certainly a tradition in town. And it's not only with the Cumberland High School kids, but you always see a lot of Bishop Hendricken kids, especially with Coach Doyle, and a lot of LaSalle kids with Coach Skelly and Coach Myers. And yeah, a lot of times they'll use it as a tempo run, but they still get competitive. And in fact, you see a lot of years. Some years, high school kids have won this race. I know that last year's winner Bronson had won this after graduating from high school. So did Brian Doyle and also Colin Tierney. So that shows you how competitive the high school kids are in this race.
Yeah, and speaking of competition, this is a race that generally gets a lot of top level competition, including some past Olympians in the early years. I know we had Matt Centrowitz running this race, as well as a few others. If one of you guys could tell us about, just that type of competition that we've been having at this race year after year, particularly in the early years, again, having some top Olympians. I think John Gregoric, I believe he also ran this, but yeah, talk about the competition.
Well, the competition has been phenomenal over the years. Like you said, past Olympians and Olympic people who had Olympic aspirations have all run in it. There's one year where the younger Gregoric and Matt Centrowitz were planning on running the 4th of July race, but then they end up making Olympic trials, so they didn't end up running the race. So those are the type of competitors that we get. We had Karen Smyers, who was a world-class triathlete, and she won the race, I think, 6 times. And she was a phenomenal runner for many, many years.
And I know for me personally, there was 2 straight years where I was actually battling Ann Hurd in the last final yards of the race, just beating her, but not by much. But also past winners, Bobby Doyle, a multiple winner at the Ocean State Marathon, and also Tom Grundy, who was a past race director. I think Tom won it 4 years, I believe.
So Bobby and Tom have won 4 times each.
So Bobby as well.
And Chris McGill had 6 wins, I believe.
Yeah,
that's right. So, yeah, St. Raphael's coach Chris McGill, a multiple winner, and always comes back and starting to win all the Masters divisions each and every year. And the one thing I know, and Tom, I'm sure you experienced it, is you never have to be nervous about how many people you're going to have, even if if the numbers are what you consider low coming up to the race, because race day, it just seems like swarms of people come in. And do you feel that way too, that morning you're going to get swamped?
Up until a few years ago, that was the case. We'd always have 400 people who would be getting the numbers with 2 minutes before the start of the race. But I used to be there with the starting pistol. I said, don't worry, we'll wait for you. And we always got the race started off fairly close to being on time. But I used to have to handwrite all of the pre-entries before we went to a computerized system. And things have gotten so much easier now. It's really a dream for a road race director now. Got low battery here. In any case, with everything being online and computerized now, it's so much easier. But we still get, hundreds of people come the morning of the race, which is tough to handle. I resisted going to a computerized system for many years because we didn't have the capacity of writing in all those entries the morning of. when you're expecting 400 people to be have the data entry done in time. So
yeah, and Jack, like I said, you're the Grand Marshal this year of the parade. Are you going to be doing the race virtually? Are you going to be doing it that day of the race too, as well as being the Grand Marshal? And if you are, how are you going to juggle that?
Yeah, actually, that's something I've been thinking of because I was trying to look at the times that I have to be at the starting line for the Grand Marshal, and assuming that it's going to take a couple of hours, and I'm not really sure. I was thinking also maybe of doing it on July 2nd. That happens to be my oldest daughter's 50th birthday, so I thought that they might be good. But yeah, if I can, I'm going to try to do it on the 4th, and I want to do it on that course, of course.
Yeah, and that the one thing I want to say about the course, I know a lot of people are going to want to probably run on the original course. If you do that, I do ask that you continue to do the social distancing guidelines, and please be safe as far as all that goes, because I do think we're going to get a swarm. There's potential to get a lot of people the day of the race. But how about, let's speak about the course. Jim, what's your thoughts on the course? It seems like a fair course, to get a decent time, especially for these high schoolers that are going to probably be using this as a tune-up to the summer training, or actually a kickoff to their summer training. What's your thoughts on the course that we use right now?
Oh, I think it's a pretty fast course. I mean, it's got a few undulations, and obviously the little incline or hill, if you want to call it, about 3.5 miles. But that's really the only rise on the course whatsoever. Other than that, it's pretty flat. I mean, many will remember the course prior to 2005, which was much more challenging, in my opinion, and probably 20 to 30 seconds slower. So this course is pretty fast. I mean, even the beginning has a little bit of a rise, but after that, it really flattens out. And other than the small incline at about 3.5 miles, it's a pretty fast course. So if the weather's good, then that's why you see some pretty good times on that course.
And the one thing about this race that kind of distinguishes it from the rest is the price is always right for this particular race. It's not a very expensive race, and we're going to continue to make the price right. And this year, the race is only going to be $10, and it's going to include a T-shirt. We're also going to have prizes in all the different age categories that the Arnold's Mills race generally had. So it ranges from junior to senior level running. So it's a lot of different divisions that we're going to be offering prizes to. And again, just $10. The race needs to be run, or you need to be running the runs between June 28th and July 4th. Guys, anything else you'd care to add about this Arnold's Mills race? Again, I believe it's one of the oldest, or could be the oldest race in Rhode Island. Is it?
Some people claim that the Gatsby Days race has been going on longer, but I'm not sure. I don't know if that was continuous for all those years, but they canceled this year. But Gatsby Days has been around for 50 years or so. I will be marking off and repainting the mile marks for both courses. So people choose to do the old course, they can do that. I'll have mile markers painted on the road, and I'll do it for the new course as well.
And I believe there is a course map up on the website. If not, I think we could probably get one up there, or at least let people know the different streets that the course follows. But again, I encourage people to participate in this race. It's been a tradition going on for more than 50 years, in something that people kind of rely on each year. So that's why we're going virtual. We want to keep this tradition going. We know it's not going to be the same, but we're going to do the best we can with the circumstances. But guys, I appreciate you taking the time to join us this today to talk about the Arnold's Mills race. But again, July, between June 28th and July 4th is when you would register for this race. And again, you would go to arnoldsmillsparade.com. That would be the website, the website you would have to go to register. But again, we encourage you to please to register for this race and participate. When you do register, after you run, you're going to have to go back on to put your time into the system, and the instructions are all there on the website. How to do that. They're going to give you some kind of code that you have to put in, but you'll see all the instructions on the website. But again, we encourage you to participate in this, particularly the high schoolers that are looking to kick off their summer training with college and high school. Well, some of them are going to have college coming up, some high school, but a great race, a great tradition, and we hope to see you there. And again, guys, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.